Hello, 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 and welcome to the Engage and Retain Preventing User Drop Off workshop. How are we doing today? I hope you are well. So, as we begin, the place where I want to start is setting up some ground rules. How do we workshop? We workshop by being mute by default for those on Zoom. Please use reactions. I want to hear in a different way how you're feeling about the content. Always feel free to use reactions. Feel free to leverage the chat because I love the chat as a way to know how things are going or what's going on. So if something is off, or if you have a comment or a question or a thought, or just want to use the chat to take notes, by all means, please do. And then be prepared, right? There's going to be some exercises during this workshop, and I want you to be active. So whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on Zoom, whether you're on YouTube, please leverage the chat and answer the questions and take notes. Because at the end, there are going to be opportunities for questions, and I want to make sure that you're ready for them. So go ahead, and if you're ready to talk about how you're spotting drop off, press 1 in the chat to let me know that you're ready. All right, the ones are rolling in. Very, very exciting. So we talked about how to ask questions. And so this is how questions are asked. I don't know what's up with this slide. I'm sorry, so I'll talk through it. You'll be waiting for the Q&A section. There is a Q&A section at the end of this presentation. So if you have a question and you want to write it down and you want to ask, please feel free. This is for folks in the Zoom. If you are watching this elsewhere, please use the chat. If you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, if you use the chat, I will answer it as you send it. So please send it in that way. And for everyone at the end, there is a feedback form. Please leverage that feedback form to ask questions, right? If you have a private question you don't want to get into publicly, I will be answering everything that comes into that inbox at the end of the day. So within 24 hours, you'll get a response. All right, so I want to start with a thought. When we're talking about our customers, when we're talking about making better products for our customers, we need to talk about specificity. Because the more specific we are, the better we serve the customer. And so when we talk about drop off, the key to fixing drop off, and what we're going to talk about in different ways during this workshop, is that we have to find specificity. We have to find specificity within our customer. We have to find specificity within our product. And we have to find specificity in how much we can do as a team or a company. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this workshop. To help us do that, we're going to go through all of these things as an employee at a fictional company called Bobco. And Bobco right now is having a really big problem with a high abandonment rate. And since they sell pet supplies, that just won't do. Where the abandonment rate is happening is in between the adding to cart and the payment of the things inside of the cart. So once they get to checkout, people tend to drop. And that is user drop off, right? We're trying to explore what happens between two interactions that that stops us from getting the outcomes that we're looking for. And so I want to get specific about the type of user drop off that we're talking about. So, as I mentioned, user drop off is when customers or users who are active just stop coming to the platform. And sometimes there are different reasons for that. Sometimes your users don't need it anymore. Say you have a resume service. Once I, as a customer, get a job, I'll stop using it. And there's nothing you can really do to bring me back to that platform unless I need another job. Sometimes there's another force. And by force, I mean an external force from outside of your purview, right? Sometimes there's a regulatory change, right? If you're working with a financial company or HR company or any company that has any type of regulation, sometimes there's a change in that regulation and that means your product is not usable. Sometimes my business fails and I stop, right? There's no use going back and trying to get somebody back into your platform if their business has stopped. But sometimes we fail, right? And sometimes that failure comes from a lack of understanding of the customer. And they leave and go find a competitor that does the job better for them. And that is what we're going to focus on. That type of user drop off is what our focus is for today. Now, there are three things that you need to think about. And I mentioned them earlier, but I'm going to be a bit more clear here. We need specificity with our customer. Who is our customer? And why do they come to us? We also need specificity with our platform. What is our platform? What does it do for the customer? And what is the gap between the ideal version of what we say we do and what actually happens? And the third comes with opportunity. Do we have the ability to actually implement the fixes that we are setting up? It doesn't matter if it's the perfect fix if we can't fix it. And so we're going to start with the first one, which is all about how do we know our customer? Who is your customer? Do you know who your customer is? It's always a good question, I think, to start with when you start talking about drop off, because your customers are the ones that are doing something on your platform. What are some questions? Right. Let's start with who are they? What's important in that customer's life right now when they interact with your platform? How do they engage with your website or application? You can ask, what do they want? If they had to do one thing on your website or one thing on your app, what would that thing be? And what problem are they trying to solve? What's the problem that your application solves for them? And last, what's scary to the customer? There's some pain that your application is fixing for them, whether it's very generalized, right? You might be fixing the problem of boredom, but right, it might be hyper specific. Like in our Bobco example, they need to feed their dog. Lastly, what is the nightmare scenario for your customer? What's the scary thing for them? Can you answer that question? Can you say what's the worst thing that can happen based around the need that the customer has? If you can't, right, you need to be getting more information about your customer. And so, how are 3 ways you can do that? Well, first, you can go talk to them. This is the number one thing I suggest you do. If you do not have a regular cadence in which you reach out to your customers and talk to them, then you need to start having that, right? Having that on a regular cadence, even if it's just a coffee conversation with your customers, gives you the ability to learn a lot more about those 3 questions. Second, you can use data analysis tools like your Pendos, for example, or your user pilots. These are going to give you some concept and data around who the customer is, what's important to them, what pages they visit the most, what interactions do they do most often. And the third thing which is outside of the scope of this class or workshop, but I will give you resources in which to do this, is to map out the customer journey. And the simplest way of putting that is, for your customer journey, your customer starts somewhere. I always forget this is mirrored. Your customer starts somewhere, right? And they have all these interactions and then they end somewhere. What does that look like? And yes, there are many tools and tactics for you to do that, but just for the sake of this workshop and the sake of you to start thinking about it, like, take out a pen and paper and just write out what are the steps that they take. So in Bob Coe's example, right, the product manager decides to start doing these things and he starts to see patterns. He gives the persona a name, Eric, right? This allows identification. Now, when you're talking about the person that you're serving, you have a name, and then you can also put a face to the name. There are some AI tools that exist, like This Person Doesn't Exist, where you can literally pull up a random picture of a person, and that can serve as your avatar. And so in this case, at Bob Code, they named him Eric. They defined the job to be done. I use job to be done as just a parlance. The term job to be done is a tool leveraged by or created by folks like Bob Moesta that allows you to simplify what is that person doing on your website. Now, I will also include resources at the end about jobs to be done. So if you want to go deeper into that, please do. And then Eric is looking to buy things for his dog digitally. Eric is a traveler, right? A lot of their customers are travelers who like to keep things up for their dog. That's the differentiation of the company. They're really focused on helping travelers travel with their dogs and to do so in a very clear way. And what is Eric scared of, or what is this group of people that we serve scared of? And they're scared of getting stuck with a bill in some town that they don't know, and the return policy is so esoteric and strange they can't really do anything with it, so they're stuck with something they don't need. And if they figure that out, they say, I might as well just go to Amazon, right? Which is what Bob Code does not want. Learn why your customers may leave. A customer that is frustrated with your platform will probably stay with your platform if they are just simply frustrated. The reason why I say fear instead of frustration is based on that. If you are solving the core need, then I will deal with you. But if you are not helping me solve my fear, it is a matter of time before I leave. Or, right, everything could be great. And if my fear isn't being resolved with your platform, I'll eventually find somebody that does resolve that fear and they will leave. So it's imperative to learn your customer, learn who they are, learn what they need and what scares them. Because that's going to give you the ammunition you need to stop them from leaving. And so we're going to get into our first exercise here. Whoops, I realized I didn't explain this. I jumped right into it. So we're going to restart the timer. You're going to write a persona of your customer, right? You're just going to basically write out who they are, what's important to them based on your application, and what scares them. And then you're going to ask yourself, wait, after this, I need to do more to really ground myself in this. And so after this workshop, I intend to do blank in order to learn. And so you're going to write that here in the chat. Either you're going to write that on LinkedIn or you're going to write that here on Zoom. And you have 5 minutes to do so. And with that, off we go. And if you have any questions while this is happening, please leverage the chat. I will answer them as soon as I see them. See you in 5 minutes. All right. So, thank you, folks, for answering questions there. My hope is just the exercise of it is helping you start to think about who your customer is and giving you ideas of how to reach out to them. Right there, once you know to reach out to customers, you realize that there are a million ways to do it. One of the best resources to help you do that is Give Constable's book, Talking to Humans. And so, what this book is going to deep dive on is exactly what we're talking about here. How do you understand who your customer is? And from different points of view, how do you build a persona that is intelligible to everyone else in the company? So, uh, I highly recommend this book. And let's keep going. So, the other thing that I had mentioned was a very clear problem set, right? We have to know what is the problem. Although I mentioned frustrations can be uh, a source of annoyance, right? They also still can push our customers to leave, right? If we're not dealing with the fear. So why we start with the customers to understand how do we categorize our problems. Now that we have an understanding of our customer, we can start to create a clear problem set. And how do we start to do that? What? What's the problem? What's stopping them from doing what's important? How can we get more specific about that? Well, here's some things to think about. Let's zoom out. First, let's zoom out of the problem. Let's start talking about how does your product work? What are the different interactions that a customer has inside of your product? What are some of the things that happen internally, meaning the architecture of your product? How does it work? What are the nuts and bolts of it? Next, what's the outcome they should have? You built this feature for a reason, or it's built for a reason. What's the reason? And how do we know if it's successful? Third, what's frustrating about your product? What is the gap between what we sell, market, and how it works? And then, of course, if there are bugs, what are they? What is stopping us from uh, a clear completion? What is stopping us from success that is internal to the product? So, uh, there's a couple of ways in which you're going to go find all this information out. One is going to be to talk to customer support. Sure, you can talk to marketing and sales. I think those are conversations you should have right after, but the most impactful conversation you'll have is with customer support. They will be able to tell you who, what, where, why, what are they telling you? What's screaming at them on a regular basis? Now, they may have ideas about features and ways to fix it, and that's fine, right? We want to take those in. We don't want to just go build them, but we want to take those considerations in. But more importantly, understanding what the frustrations are, right? Uh, they are the wow, I'm losing the term. They are the masters of that, right? They are the subject matter experts when it comes to frustration. So leverage them. Next is if you have a tool like Full Story, go watch a customer use the product. And well, the great thing about Full Story is since you're not in the room, right, you can't jump in, right? You're just watching the thing happen. If you don't have that tool and you have the ability to, there's an opportunity to do what is called contextual inquiry, meaning we're going to sit and we're going to watch the customer or the user use the thing, and we're just going to take notes. During this process, it's critical that you do not say anything, do not steer them. You have to watch them. And if they get frustrated, then they get frustrated. Do not give them a way out. Last is one of the tools I really enjoy doing because it gives a very clear understanding of the product, and that is a workshop called Service Blueprinting. And as I mentioned before, I will give more resources in our resource section at the end and after this workshop. But just so you know, service blueprinting is uh, somewhat similar to the customer journey, except we're just now talking about the product. What does the customer see? What does the customer not see? And how do we lay that out in clear steps? So, hopefully, what this does is it makes your architecture much clearer, and whatever gaps that you have, right now, you have an opportunity to go talk to the people who are responsible for those gaps and fill in the story. And so now you can start to get an understanding of what's important to what's the problem, right? What's the idea that we're selling, and why aren't we selling it? In Bobco's case, Eric has a couple of problems, right? As we mentioned, Bobco's all about helping customers on the go, and so Eric has three problems that they need to solve. One is unclear shipping costs. Eric doesn't know what the shipping costs are until Eric gets to the end of the checkout. And depending on where he is, that could be a major problem, right? In one location, the shipping cost may be $3. In another location, it may be 30, right? That determines how he spends. And so Eric will leave the platform. Now, Eric wants to use a specific way of paying. Eric wants to use Apple Pay because Eric is very transient. Eric just loves to have his phone available and not deal with anything else. Problem is, Bobco doesn't do that. And so once Eric gets to the end of the process, Eric goes, either I'm going to take out my credit card, and sometimes I just don't feel like it. And lastly, Eric sees that there's an unclear return policy. And to Eric, that means, right? I'm going to be stuck in London and I won't be able to return this, or I don't know how or what the process is. So I'm going to be stuck with an extra thing I don't need. And so I'd rather not deal with it. And so when you find those problems, those are the opportunities you have to fix it, right? Those are going to be the things in which your ideas should be applied to. Now that you know your customer and you know the problem sets, the ideas are fairly easy, right? You know your product, and so yeah, you'll have tons of ideas. And if you don't have them, your team has them. Here's our problem. Write it up on a whiteboard, or write it up in a Zoom room, or write it up in a mirror board, and say, here's a problem that we're facing. Here's why it's a problem. Here's who it affects. Ideas, and believe you me, everybody will have them. The hard part is knowing how to steer people, but once you know how to steer people, the ideas come fairly easily. So in this next exercise, you're going to write out some problems, right? You're going to pick a problem that your customer has. You're going to write the source of that problem. How did you learn it? And you're going to think about changes that you can make to tackle that problem. And you're going to drop that into the chat. As usual, if there are any questions or something doesn't feel right, please leverage the chat and I will answer that as soon as possible. Have fun. All right. So my hope is that through that exercise, you got an opportunity to, kind of think about how problems fit inside of your organization. Uh, Maybe even further, after more analysis, you'll think about what gaps exist inside of your platform. And even further still, what promises do you make that you need to have, which is versus promises that you don't need to have anymore? Right? Maybe that creates a level of specificity inside of your product. So there are two books that I think are super helpful for this type of work. One is Product Research Rules. The great thing about Product Research Rules is if you need to know anything about research, whether it's research internally or externally, Product Research Rules has it. Also, you'll notice a familiar name on the back as a blurb. Me. I really love this book. It's one of my most dog-eared books when thinking about product research, and I've been doing it for years. I still go back to it. Um, I think it's useful for you as well. Next is a newer book that has been uh, getting dog ears, which is Continuous Discovery Habits. Now, when we were talking about these opportunities, you probably need a way to outline those opportunities in a clear way. The good news is that Opportunity Solution Trees from Teresa Torres is a great way of doing that. And her book, Continuous Discovery Habits, gives you a very clear way of taking those problems and turning them into opportunities. Our last, oh yeah, Teresa's great. Um, our last bit is transparent throughput. Can you do this? Can you? All of the problems in the world and all the cool things that we could possibly do uh, mean absolutely nothing if we can't actually do them. And so, one of the things that I tend to see in workshops like this, and even from myself in the past, is not thinking about the operations of product work, whether it's product design, product management, product engineering. Really, can we do what we set out to do, and how well do we do it? And I think the work of operations, especially in smaller teams, falls on everyone. And in order to start to answer that question, you need to think about what the problem is, and then you got to ask yourself a couple of things uh, that are important to that. Right? What can we do? What are the skills that we have on the team? What are the tools that we have available to make changes? How fast can we do it? Asking yourself what's the fastest way you can learn something is very important. Same thing with what takes the least lift from the team. I can have a huge project that'll solve every problem, but again, if we're swamped, doesn't matter, right? We won't even get a chance to try it. And then lastly, what else is important to the team right now? What other projects are in play? Uh, what else is out there for the team, right? There's other things that are happening. It is extremely rare that any product development team is on an island and has one thing to do. There's always a million things to do. What else is at play? And not just the additive piece, but also an ability to combine, right? What are the ideas that we've come up with that are in line with the big initiatives that we have, right? Maybe one of the opportunities that we've come up from the last section is a better way of doing something else or a faster way of learning something else. That is where you can, from an operations standpoint, really add value to the team and lower your workload at the same time. And so, how do we know what we can do? One is talk to your team. Do you have a clear understanding of what projects are happening? Who's working on what? A simple conversation of like, hey, what are you working on? Can give a lot of insight, especially if you don't know what's going on. Two, make a clear list of the opportunities and projects. Sometimes this looks like in the Phoenix project, which I'm going to reference you to at the end of this section. It looks like a bunch of note cards that they put in a room, and they literally take the note cards and lay them all out. For you, it could look like a list. It can look like a Miro board. It could look like a Trello, but just list everything down. Have a visible way of looking at it, and then reference it. So once a week, or once every 2 weeks, or once a sprint, um, whatever it is, just take a look and keep an eye on it. And then lastly, create a source of truth. Uh, One of the issues that I see teams have, especially leaders in the product space, right? Director of product, director of design. Other teams have no idea of the work required to do anything. And so it is very useful outside of a roadmap, which in some ways can be a source of truth, but that's a whole other conversation. I don't want to get into it. You should have some sort of one pager that says, this is the work that we're working on. This is how long it's going to take. This is the value, right? And whenever somebody asks you what's going on in the team, you can point them to it. Hey, this is your source. This is our source of truth. Here's who our customer is. Here are the problems that we're trying to solve. Here are the projects that we're working on. If you want to get into this, if you have an idea, here's how you ask. Done and done. So back in Bobco's case, right, they had 3 different projects. They had changing the payment processor, highlighting costs, and changing their return policy. Now, each of these have different types of lift. And what I mean by lift is how much work is required to get this done. So the changing the payment processor, while it's a great idea and solves a lot of the issues that they're seeing, is a super high lift. They'll never get to it. Highlighting the cost is a medium lift. Maybe, right? There's an initiative that it's talking about how to make things easier for the customer. They may not be able to do this now, but they'll be able to slide it later, right? There's something down the line that probably could get bumped for highlighting costs. And then lastly, changing our return policy. Well, we have a UX writer on this team. We can make that happen fairly easily. So that's a low lift, and we can get that started right now. Because the truth is you only have but so much time, and it's important for you to choose wisely. So, our next exercise is I want to ask you what are the top three projects that you're working on right now? Don't be specific, right? Use fake names if you're worried about giving anything away. Use fake names, but have them be meaningful for you. Write down the priority. What's important? Why is it important? And ask yourself if your suggested fixes or fix that you came up with earlier trump any of those projects. If they can, tell me why. If they can't, well, be honest about that. It's not more important. And so I want you to put that in the chat. Any questions? Let me know, and I'll see you in a bit. All right. Want to get better at this. I mentioned the Phoenix project earlier. It may seem like it's outside of like the product purview, but one of the things I hope you'll learn through your journey is that there are a lot of great ideas in other types of books, other genres, and so it's really good to pull them in to fit your context. And so the Phoenix Project is one of the best books on operations and business ops in general that I've ever read. And I hope that you read it too, because it'll go into how to make all of this stuff work in a way that is far more cohesive than I think a lot of the ways that product, like general product books, talk about it. And so, what I hope you got out of this is that fixing drop off is all about specificity. What can we, who can we work, who is the person that we're serving, what is our product, and what are the frustrations, and can we do it? Some tools, right? Some tools that'll help you do this: Pendo, Full Story, Mixpanel, Google Analytics, Heap, User Pilot, Amplitude, all great choices to help you figure all these things out. And so I'd like to give you 2 minutes to fill out this survey. I'm going to drop a link in the chat in just 1 second. My hope is that you are able to give me some notes, because I'm all about iteration and I want this to get better. I also want to know if you have any questions or things that I can answer, how I can help you. And so, with both, the form gives you an opportunity to do so. So here's the form in the chat. There's a QR code there. And so I'll give you 2 minutes to do so. All right, thank you. Hopefully, you were able to get in there and ask some questions. I'm very excited to uh, see what your questions may be and your feedback. Um, with that, are there any questions? You can go right into Q&A. Feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, or drop something in the chat. We have no. Ah, did you provide a list of resources on the second to last screen? Yes, Diana, I did provide a list of resources. In fact, I'm going to send a more comprehensive list when I send out the slides and the video for this workshop. So you'll be able to get links, uh, do a little bit of digging on some of the resources that have been mentioned during this presentation, and you'll be able to ask questions because my contact information will be there. So if you have any more questions about some of the resources that I provide, feel free to reach out to me and I'll get that answered for you. And if there are no more questions, I want to thank you all for joining me. I hope this workshop was fantastic. Oh, how can I work more on transparent throughput? So, Diana, I think the most impactful thing that you can do regarding transparent throughput is start to write down your projects, right? And then start to ask yourself, can we accomplish this? Then, in a week, take a look back at the list that you wrote and see how accurate you were. Every time you do this, you're going to get a little bit more accurate on uh, understanding what your throughput is. On the other side, about communicating it, once you feel a little bit confident in your projection, then there's an opportunity probably inside of the company where you can start to announce these things. Uh, so internally, you can take a look at like sprint planning and talk about how our throughput is doing. Once you get a bit more confidence there, take it to more public venues, maybe sprint reviews. And then lastly, if there's space for it, like all hands or uh, if there are conversations with your leadership, that is where you especially need to be clear about what your throughput is and seek their input and figure out ways in which to accomplish the things that are important. So I think by one, writing it down and checking yourself, and two, finding places to start to communicate it. First, in the most safe place, and then, you know, throughout, let's say, a quarter, getting it to the point where you feel confident to go talk to, uh, upper management about it is the way to go. I hope that answered your question. All right, thank you. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, everyone. If you need anything, of course, all my contact information will be in the email and in the slides. And I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you for joining me. Bye.